Please join me in welcoming Justin Gray of LeadMD. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
And we've got Christine Elliott of Crowe, Horwath. Thanks, Christine. And Michael Ballard from Lenovo. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Take it away, you guys.
We're joking. We'll see if this clicker actually works for me today. There we go. Here we are again. Maybe. So just a quick note about myself and LeadMD. LeadMD is a digital marketing consultancy. We specialize around Marketo and Salesforce specifically. We've done just over 2,700 engagements on the Marketo platform, implemented just over half of their user base, and we've been around since 2009. I myself founded the organization. I'm an early Marketo user, and frankly, I just love digital marketing. So happy to be here and to moderate this panel with these two experts as we talk about lead nurturing. Happy to kill dead space. There we go. So I think, Christine, you're going to start us off here with a couple slides around you guys' journey through lead nurturing and so on. So I will pass the baton over to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and not abandoning us for another round of David Meerman Scott. So thank you very much. Hopefully you will find this educational and maybe even entertaining. So just a quick intro. Crowe Horwath is a public accounting and consulting firm. And our lead nurture journey goes back 4 years. Ooh, I'm an early adopter of Eloqua, so I'm an Eloqueen and an Eloqua old-timer, right? So we do have a long history, and I'm just going to share a couple of little snippets of things from our program with you today. So my main message is, which I think is very consistent with what we've heard already, is you really need to embrace transformation. The world as we knew it back in the day when I started my marketing career, it was direct marketing. And that was dependable and predictable, and it was awesome. And it's just not that way anymore. And I really believe that creating a culture of transformation in your efforts is critical to stay relevant over time. And so I'm going to talk about that today in the context of our Lead Nurture program and the evolution of the structure of our program over the last 4 years. And going hand in hand with that and everything we do as B2B marketers is how do you measure your results? So I'm going to share some results and insights that we've gotten from a recent enterprise content audit that we did. So with that, okay, it's not important to see every word on here, but when we started our lead nurture journey in 2012, we based it around market issues. It was a specific business unit within banking that said, we want to nurture a program. They had 2 pieces of content, and what we came up with was market-based issues that we felt would be good. It was a drip campaign. So if you downloaded a piece of content on one of those topics, each month you would get another piece of content on that topic. At any point, you could choose to change to a different track, and that's just how we set it up. So we were off and running. We started with 48 pieces of content, which in retrospect, if you would have told me that's what I was going to do, I would have laughed, of course. But we really just jumped right in. And we ran this way, the program this way, for almost 2 years, in part because it took so long to set it up. It was like, now we're going. We really created an operational machine. And during that time period, our clients would now say it really impacted their brand awareness in the market space, which was fantastic news to hear. However, as you might imagine, they wanted more. They wanted lead gen. So they really pushed us and said, this is great, but how do we really transform this and make it into sales opportunities? We're trying to sell work. The other part of this was that we didn't think about when we started was, this requires 6 new pieces of content every 4 weeks. So we were tired, frankly. So we knew we had to look at things differently. And so what we evolved to is looking at it by audience. So we said, what if a CFO might be interested in all of that content, but if they were just in one track, they didn't get exposure to maybe the most relevant content for them. So we switched to doing it by audience. So we could really say, okay, if you're a CFO, now you're going to get content that was in the various tracks, and hopefully that's going to be a better indication of interest of where you are in the buy cycle. So we thought, this really makes sense. Some of the challenges we had with this was we still weren't getting a good read on who was ready to buy. And so it was just kind of like a different way to do what we had done before. But it was an improvement. After that, we kind of said, okay, the drip thing doesn't work anymore because we've just got to think about doing it a different way. And so we went to mini campaign structure. So the concept here is it's not a drip, but it's you download one piece of content, and then in a sequence, you will get additional content, add in inside sales, and see if that generates any better results. And it did. I mean, what we found was people who engaged with 3 pieces of content within a mini campaign were more interested. Maybe not yet ready to talk to us, so we still struggled with the inside sales component, but we learned so much about it. And then the 4th iteration we are just now implementing, where we're really aligning things. It's still a mini campaign, but what we recognized was that we're not speaking as clearly to different audiences. So in this particular one, there's banks under 10 billion and banks above 10 billion. And so they have different needs. So the first piece of content they're getting on this market issue is different because depending on what your asset size is, you need to do different things. But now we're leveraging, and our checklist, which is our second component of the campaign, really focuses on the large banks because the small banks are going to get there. And so we're going to have a sidebar, though, that speaks specifically to the issues. We talked about, do we have 2 different pieces of content? Well, we can't afford that. And is there a way that we can combine it together in a way that's meaningful? And finally, our late-stage piece is a case study portfolio, which will include a case study of somebody who's just approaching that 10 billion. And this, I think, is really important because whereas our mini campaigns before were on the same topic, but different components of it, we weren't telling a story and we weren't building it. So in this scenario, this is all about one topic, model validation, and then the yellow arrows at the bottom are about a strong call to action. So we're going to have links in each piece to the other pieces and really trying to build momentum so that when they see the case studies, they're going to request a demo. So that's very short, kind of synopsis of where we've been. In terms of an enterprise content audit, we found some amazing things in our assessment, one of which was 34% of our content needs to be looked at right now because it's aging itself. We have a lot of regulatory issues that we talk about, and we could turn people off because we're aging ourselves by mentioning those regulations in the content. And by the way, while right now 34% of our content needs attention, ultimately 60% of the content we're making is going to require a lot of updating over time. And then finally, repurposing is incredibly difficult, and not surprisingly, not a lot of our content is repurposable. Obviously, it's much better when you plan for it in advance. And then just finally, the thing that was, I think, most interesting was the bar chart shows what the actual content piece is, who they were geared for. We would tell you that CFOs are the most important audience for us and that we're hammering them with content, and that is true. But if you look at, in actuality, we are not developing content that speaks directly to the CFO. So that's just another example of how you can measure things and look at things and really get some surprising insights that make a big difference. So.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll pass it over to Michael.
Okay.
So the harder you press, the more it changes.
Just wave it around.
Wave around. Good times. I am not Christine.
No, and those are the takeaways.
There we go.
There we
I
go.
love bacon. Who loves bacon? Who loves leads? Oh, click down? Got it. Point to you. You're my clicker. Nice. I like that. Next slide. I try to throw bacon into everything I do, and I really had a tough time doing it here. Go ahead to the next one for me. But I found this fun little way to connect bacon with almost everything. In Raleigh, where I'm based, they do a race they just ran a couple weeks ago. It's called the Krispy Kreme Challenge. You run a 5K marathon, but halfway through you stop and eat a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts and then run back. That's my kind of exercise, right? So go ahead to the next slide. How many people, next slide, have seen this chart? If you don't, print it off. Scott Brinkman does this every year. It's awesome. I print it. It's on my desk. I highly suggest it, but I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love it because it shows how big our marketing technology space has become, how many different options we have, but I hate it because I now have too many options. And this is just getting bigger. He's about to put out the next iteration of it, and I have a feeling he's going to have a hard time jamming all these together. Next slide. So what I wanted to do was take you guys, take a slightly different turn on this and show you how we use different technologies throughout the funnel in our lead nurture programs. We do the serious decision funnel method, and rather than reiterating that on the slide, down at the bottom I just simply put down what are their goals throughout the funnel. All the way to a sale or an MQL. So our first goal is we're in a crowded marketing space. We are trying to get people's attention. Hey, look over here. How do you do that? Well, you do that with fun, engaging content. We do a lot of video. We do a lot of interactive content, things that are not about Lenovo. David said this morning, he said, no one cares about your product. And that's true. It's kind of like, I tell my team often, it's kind of like dating. You're not going to walk across to a complete stranger you've never seen before, give them a completely sloppy, wet kiss, and ask them to marry you. You don't do that. You got to go through a dating process. So we're not going to go straight to the gut and say, hey, 60% off, buy now. We don't do that. I'm going to show you a bunch of technologies that we use in our stack, and I use them in different forms or different locations of the funnel. So if I have certain ones up at certain spots, it's just because I needed to spread them out throughout the rest for you. We use Vidyard for video. I mentioned video. That's a really important medium for us. We do a lot of video. Vidyard's great because it connects directly to your marketing automation system. So now if you're going to YouTube, you can get your generic metrics. How many people watched your video? Well, that's great, but that can't do anything with lead scoring. I can't find and enhance the digital body language of someone to determine where to take them down the next path. Vidyard connects those dots. It then lines up the cookie within your marketing automation platform. So now I know that Joe Smith watched XYZ video, the whole thing, 80% of it, 10% of it. Maybe they watched a certain part of it 3 times, and we can lead score based on that. We use Compose for our content management, not web content management, but actually creation of content. So from beginning to end, we manage the entire production and workflow, as well as the publishing of that, and it tracks all our metrics. It also is tied in with Salesforce, our CRM platform, and now we can look at how people interact with different pieces of content throughout the sales funnel. They call it content scoring. So we can actually have a map that shows us what pieces work best in what parts of the funnel and against what type of personas. Really powerful stuff to know. Lastly, speaking of content management systems, we just switched to a new web platform called Silverstripe. I love it, big advocate of it. It's an open source PHP platform based out of New Zealand, of all places. If you're looking for a new web platform, check these guys out. Next slide. So now that I've gotten someone's attention, I want to keep them engaged with our brand. The next big step is I want to know who they are. So I've started that dating process, and now we're getting a little deeper. Eloqua is our system of marketing automation. So that's where our universe sits. We obviously do email through that, lead scoring, obviously. And we also do social targeting. So we have their social platform tied into there, as well as the LinkedIn lead accelerators in there as well for display advertising. We also are an Adobe marketing shop, and we use Audience Manager. So we collect all the data that we get based on the web traffic that comes in. We can do personas. We can buy third-party data, plug it into there. We can do predictive analysts, analysts on that, and basically create traits of people that we want to target. We also have that plugged into if we know who you are. We know your name. We know what company you're with. But we know what industry you're in. If we have it tied into Salesforce, we know if you have an open opportunity. If you have an open opportunity, what product is that with? So now we can take all that information and plug it back into our ecosystem of products. And I'll show you some of the dynamic web stuff that we're getting to a little later on. We're also doing a lot of interactive content ions, another tool that we use to create interactive content as we go down the funnel. Next slide. Now I know who you are. You're now engaged with us. I want to find out when you raise your hand and you have an open opportunity. I don't want to be forceful. I want to look for subtle nuances to do that. There's great ways to do it. Sure, if you do traditional lead scoring, you can find those things based on how many web visits someone's had, email, opens, clicks, display ads, so on and so on. We're also bringing in third-party data, so we can look at things such as Bombora as a great intent platform. But we've also been finding a lot of success with 6 Sense for predictive. So 6 Sense is great in the predictive space. Not only are they showing who's most likely to buy what product, but the critical part is in what time frame. So we're talking about where they're at in the funnel so we can deliver that more relevant content to them. I mentioned that we are now using the Oracle social platform. So in as much the same way as you send an email, we find your social profile, and just like you drop into a campaign canvas, you can drop in send this person a tweet, or this group of contacts a tweet. And then we're doing that same thing with LinkedIn. So with LinkedIn, we have the retargeting platform on the previous slide. What's really neat about that, I should mention that too, is when you're doing retargeting, if someone anonymous comes in, so we don't know who you are, but you go out into the big World Wide Web, LinkedIn will then, if that cookie profile converts anywhere on the display network, so if your email address gets attached to it, and that email address matches our Elliott database, they hand the cookie over to us. And now we can do one-to-one advertising on the display network as well as within the sponsored feeds. And then with Adobe Target, we're doing dynamic web content. So I have all this great information. I know who you are, industry, we have the predictive, we have opportunity data coming in. So now when you come to our website, I can serve up content that's relevant to what I know about you. So I no longer, if you're in healthcare and you come to our homepage, I can change all the imagery to be healthcare related. If you had an open opportunity in servers, I can now change all of my featured content to be servers when you come to that. Next slide. So after you get, go ahead, next slide for me. So after we identify you as an MQL, now we go into sales support mode. This is where we provide air coverage to the support team for upsells, cross-sales, so on and so on. I mentioned Salesforce as our CRM platform. We also use Discover.org. If you're not familiar with that, it's a great tool if you're hitting larger accounts. Discover.org allows the sales rep within Salesforce to look and see what other contacts are within this account. It actually gives an organizational tree, and they can click on that information and get that person's contact information and contact them directly. I put Engagio and Demand-Based up there. Full disclosure, we don't use them. We started account-based marketing a few years ago, and long story short, we pulled it back on pause. We're going to start that back up probably in about 6 months, but these two players will definitely have a seat at the table when it comes to account-based marketing. And lastly, we're a big data shop. I really try to make my team as data-driven as possible. And we use Tableau to visualize all our data. We're lucky enough to have all of our first-party data, our Salesforce data, Elliott data, SAP data, Adobe Analytics data, everything coming into a single database. And so we can now take all that information, cross it, reference, attribute, whatever you want to say, and we use Tableau to visualize that data on top of it. Next slide. That's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So a ton of notes and questions here to get through. I'd say, Michael, first question for you is how many Krispy Kremes did you get through?
I didn't do it. That's crazy. Whoever does that is nuts.
Terrible, terrible.
Yeah.
So I was also curious, maybe, and this is for both of you, how many individuals do you have on staff or as an outsourced resource to create the content that fuels these interactions?
Go ahead.
So I have managers for pretty much every channel within the funnel. And then within content, I have a top funnel, a mid funnel, and a lower funnel. So we also have agencies tied to each one of those. So we have a top funnel agency that focuses nothing on creating our engaging content. Then I have a mid funnel agency that does nothing but creates your educational pieces. So again, not Lenovo heavy stuff, but your checklist or your how-to guides, so on and so on. And then we have a sales enablement agency that we use as well.
Gotcha. Christine?
I wish I had all those agencies. That sounds amazing. We have a really small team. We do have an internal publishing group, but we have 2 internal writers who develop content for much more than just our nurture program. So when we went down that path originally and said, we've got 2 pieces of content and we need 48, we went out and talked to a bunch of different companies and ended up hiring Content for Demand, who has become truly our strategic partner in content development. There's no way we could develop the amount of content that we do and innovate as much as we do without outside assistance. But I think that's the most important thing, is really figure out what you can handle internally and do that, and then plug your holes strategically with outside help.
Makes sense. So I think the interesting thing about lead nurturing is that no one ever gets on stage and says, this is easy, right? If they do, they're probably not doing it right. So in order to kind of surround that buyer with relevant messaging that's changing all the time, how much does time play into, Christine, your strategy? You mentioned that a lot of your content had been found to be close to being out of date or out of date already. How often are you having to revisit the actual pieces within these nurture streams?
Well, we're doing it now for the first time because we've been developing the content, and that's why we wanted to go down the path of a content audit, because I don't know how to operationalize that without getting some feedback in terms of what's going on. So it's really interesting to, it's not that I'm surprised, because we are marketing to financial institutions which are highly regulated. So of course we're going to talk about regulatory issues. But to see how much of that is really impacting the overall quality of our content was huge. But I also knew that when we went down the path of doing an enterprise audit, you have to be prepared to remediate. So that's really where we're at right now, is taking that depth of analysis and really chunking it out and saying, okay, maybe some of those assets are now irrelevant because the topic isn't the same or it isn't as important. So we want to weed out what we can and then start the remediation process, and it has to be an ongoing thing.
Sure, sure. So, Michael, Christine mentioned operationalization. Is there anything that has looked awesome on paper but been really tough to create actionable in operations around?
Yes, everything. Attribution modeling is really tough, especially when it comes to revenue, especially because we have so many different sources and channels that go across. Some will dump the data really nicely, others won't. So to get true attribution revenue for all of our channels throughout the funnel is extremely difficult.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. The notion is always that no one buys because they read an ebook, right? But still, that ebook has influenced that sale. Those different touches are creating value. Christine, what do you guys use to measure attribution within the funnel?
It's truly a struggle. I think it brings to mind our work around sales and marketing alignment. We launched this program with the full support of our business leaders, who are the people who are out selling. We do have a few dedicated salespeople. So we partnered together from the beginning on this. But when we got to that point of, now let's talk about what is a lead, let's talk about who are we going to follow up on, we did some lead scoring. At the end of the day, it always seems to come that their perspective is, it was because they came to my webinar. And I'm okay with that. So what we try to do is really determine influence. So we will do things like look at all the open sales opportunities, and then because through Eloqua, our CRM, we have so much data, we can say, all right, in this bank, we have this opportunity open, and there's 5 people downloading content on that topic in that organization. Even if it's not aligned one-to-one with the person, with the complex buying environment, that's a win. And we're not trying to take credit for it, but we really are trying to measure influence.
Gotcha, makes sense. So Michael, you brought up a super hot topic right now, which is video and the use of video within nurturing. It looks like you're using that certainly at the beginning of the funnel. Are you also using that in other areas?
Yeah, we create video content for every part of the funnel. So obviously the top funnel is the fun, kind of humorous content that we do. When you go a step down and you get into the mid funnel, we're doing a lot of almost animated product brochures. So that's when we know there's an opportunity. Rather than handing a static speeds and feeds, we kind of do the 3D modeling, look, turnaround. Then when we get down to the low part of the funnel, it's really more of your recorded webinars. We've done some long product reviews, so longer pieces of content. We've also started playing around with personalized video. So personalized video is literally the ability to send a video to one of your contacts, and it literally changes the content inside that video. We just did a test with it where we changed out the text, so we put the person's name in there and changed out some images. And when I say changed out the text, I'm not talking like motion, 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 stop, static, really generic, cheesy kind of stuff. It's actually full-blown motion. The first time I saw this, they had a guy getting a tattoo with my name, and he was actually getting a tattoo with my name being spilled out, so it's full-blown motion. We just did that with a test send to a small subset of inactive contacts, so people that don't engage with us. Our click-through rates on those were 4.5x our normal average because they also deliver you a personalized thumbnail that we used inside the email. So if you think about it, you have a really compelling CTA, which is the play button, and you have the person's name on there. It creates a lot of curiosity and interest. So we have some things to do with that and other fun tests down the road.
And is that in relation to the Christmas campaign that you had mentioned?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, if you haven't checked out Vidyard's platform and what they're doing with personalization, it's really cool, especially around events and things like holiday cards. Like why send a holiday card to one controller or COO or CEO at an organization when you can send 50 or 60 different messages to relevant points of contact there. So really interesting stuff. Christine, it seems like you have quite the evolution of your nurture strategy throughout the years. How many years does that span?
It's been 4.
Okay. And what insights were you able to gain to determine that a change needed to happen there? What drove those maturity curves?
A lot of different things. That's a great question. Definitely the, let's say, not combative relationship with sales, but the strong, intense collaboration that we have has really driven a lot of it. And I mean that in the nicest way, because if sales wasn't pushing us all the time, I mean, whatever it is, if I delivered $1 million, they would say, I needed $2 million. What's wrong with you? When are we going to get $2 million? So that push and shove, while it creates a lot of tension, has really spurred us forward. And I wouldn't have wanted to have it be that way necessarily, but at the end of the day, it means that both sales and marketing are highly invested, and we push each other, because on the marketing side, I'm going to say, you want lead gen, you're not following up on the leads. So, so I think there's a healthy dynamic there that really has pushed us forward.
So we've got a couple minutes left. I want to give you guys both a chance to share either the number one insight or some advice that you'd share to someone that is either starting with lead nurturing or really looking to revolutionize what they've got in place with highly effective tactics. Michael, I'll start with you.
Start simple. Don't go advanced. You can get super advanced with your triggered automation, with your lead scoring. You can slice it and dice it 130 different ways. Don't get caught up in that hype when you start. Start simple, just do some basic things, and as you get comfortable with that, start to add on the advanced layers.
Great, awesome. Christine, same question.
I would echo that. I mean, just get started. I think it's really easy to get caught up in all of the conceptual frameworks and the theories and all of that. I would say just get started and then measure what you can. It's great to say, I wish we could measure this and this and this, but the fact is you probably have a lot of stuff you can measure, and by paying attention to that consistently, you can start to see insights that can drive your path forward.
Awesome. Well, Michael, Christine, thank you both for being with us today. Hopefully everyone learned something about lead nurturing. I know I did. And thank everyone.